Well, hey there, YouTube. It's Petey, and what's in the mailbag today? Fun segment. It should be fun for me, boring for you. So first off, we got a pair of these little packets. All of this stuff came in the is that a speed pack? That little white plasticized bag. I'm not sure. I do not know the answer to that question. This is an XH-M415. And what you do with this little guy is you connect the wiring. There's an input and a ground on this side and an output and a ground on this side. And then the little blue guy has a set and forget. Set it? What? I don't remember. So yeah, like let's say I want to power an electronic device that consumes a good amount of current, which current is like how much energy is stored in the battery. So if you put a flashlight on, the amount of current would be represented by how many hours that flashlight would be lit. And you know, there's a curve on it. In that application, the light would go brightest and drop in brightness. Now that dropping in brightness is a reflection of the voltage being lowered as the capacity of the battery drains. But they're two different things. And another analogy would be a plumbing analogy is always good. If you have a garden hose, it could be considered the length of the garden hose, and like let's say it's at an angle. So when you shut off the spigot, you're still gonna continue to get water flow. So the length of the hose could be considered roughly our capacity, or on a power supply. If you look at it, it'll say 9 volts and then it'll say 500 mAh. That's milliamp hour. So how many milliamps per hour? And like 500 milliamps is a half of an amp. So one amp is 1,000 milliamps. Now, this little guy here, its maximum throughput is 2 amps. Okay, which is pretty good for little rinky-dink electronic stuff. 2 amps is a good amount of power. For me, running these devices for my guitar, a multi-effect, they take 500 milliamps and up because they have fancy display screens, which consumes a good amount of power. Now, what this, again, the whole function of this contraption is merely limiting the voltage. So this is a voltage regulator. And what it would be good for is, like, let's say you needed 9 volts for your multi-effector. You were going to go outside and play it, or you were touring and you didn't want to run your guitar toy through the wiring at the venue because they might have some weird fluorescent light that's going to cause a buzz, a hum. You could use a battery pack and then recharge those batteries in your hotel room every night. And I know it sounds goofy, but if you understand how noisy guitar stuff can get and complicated things like ground loops, the idea of having a single battery powering your stuff is very appealing to a guy like me. So this is a voltage regulator. You can put together a battery pack that would be greater, like 12.5 volts, and then this is going to drop it down to 9. And you do that by turning the knob. The knob adjusts the voltage. So it regulates the voltage. The potentiometer is doing that job in the circuit. That's a pot, volume control, you know. And these guys cost about $250. And the neat thing about this is a step down or a buck converter, and they are very efficient. So the old way of doing it with a voltage regulator is a single component, a single part. It comes with a rating. Then they have the adjustable one where you have to add a resistor to get your desired voltage. But the good thing about this is it doesn't consume any extra electricity. Like with the old voltage regulators, they had a heat sink. So what does that tell you? Well, you're just, I mean, are we cooking here, or are we playing guitar? So you're wasting energy. Anything with a heat sink, not the most efficient design. And if you're talking about batteries, your power is at a premium. So that's the voltage regulator. I got 2 of those. This isn't going to be very exciting. 2 of the things that I thought were coming, meaning the 18650, which is it's a Tesla battery. This is what's in the Teslas, and I've collected a good, large, significant. We have a lot of these, and I get them at the resale store. They will have used laptop power pack, and if you disassemble that, you'll find 6 or 8 of those batteries in there. And you can get them in different things, like they'll have a little portable vacuum, and sometimes you might get 4 out of that. This is it's the same thing that I just showed you, but it's built into a USB chassis, and it terminates in this like 2.3 millimeter connector. This is gonna get lopped off of here, and I'm gonna put a guitar pedal connector on it. So what this does, it takes your 5-volt USB and it gooses it up to 9 volts. So I have this. This is a $129 power pack. It's Mophie makes this, and it has input charging and then 2 ports. They're rated at 2 amp output, and like I said, my achieved current rating is like 500 milliamp. That's what I'm trying to hit. These are 500 milliamp, and actually the manufacturer will tell you, oh, it's 500 milliamp because that's the power supply that they give you with it. But if you hook up a multimeter and test it, it's only drawing 400. So there's headroom of 100 milliamps if you're using one of these. So the idea with this would be, I charge this up, and then when we go to the gig, this thing is going to be what's powering one of these devices. And I've never used this. I don't really know about the efficiency of these or how long this will last. I would guess that I can get 12 hours out of this, which it sounds like a lot, but if you're doing a remote like what we do, taking a lot of gear out. I've built a 600 watt PA, which has a subwoofer with 2 10s in it. It's a Galian, or who makes your sub, honey?
The GK?
Yeah, it's Galian Kruger Neo.
Oh yeah, Galen Kruger right here. Galen Kruger, yeah.
Neo 210. So the Neo means that they designed it to be light but really powerful. So we got a 210 subwoofer box for the bass guitar and then the drums. And there's our PA speakers are 10-inch with 1-inch compression horn drivers, which are the good ones. And those are new. We had 8s, which it really wasn't my idea, but I mean, everything goes in the Toyota. So yeah, I got 2 of these. The problem with these guys is oh look, we got one connector that's the standard size. It looks like 2.1 millimeter inner diameter, 5.5 millimeter outer diameter over here. This both of these are going to have to get chopped, and then you'll snip the wires and reverse the polarity and resolder it, and then you use something called heat shrink tubing. You put one piece small diameter over each wire, and then a larger. I usually use 2 pieces on the outside of it, and the heat shrink it trumps. Calm down. It trumps electrical tape by a lot, because the electrical tape over time it's messy and gloopy, this adhesive. So how long have I had you guys here? 3 hours. I got this cable, which they look just like a regular guitar cable, but there's it's called a TRS, tip, ring, and sleeve. There's 3 connectors, and this you use this for a stereo connection, or if you have an expression pedal you can assign that to like how loud your echo will be on your setup. So like for the leads, you could play the guitar and then the lead solo would come up, and you could blend that in, the amount of echo. So that's called an expression pedal, and we use these cables. This one is 6 feet long, which is ridiculous. It's way too long really to come out of the box and go next to it. For an expression pedal, you would really want like 1.5 feet. This is 3 feet, and I use these cables for different things. Like in this case, this 6-footer is going to come out of a mixing board and go in to this little equalizer that I built. And then the output, it had a 1/4-inch jack. We put in a 3.5 mil, and the idea behind that is so I could just use this cable to piggyback. So when I build the headphone amplifier, I'll put an 1/8 inch or 3.5 mil input, and this will plug right in and keep it really nice and neat with short cabling run. And then this cable will run over to the mixer. So I'll have my own EQ, because I just got these and they're a little shy in the high end. The other set that we have it's brighter, and I just love hearing the detail. People complained about it. There's guys that they just want everything to be flat. They don't want, I like a smile curve where the bass and the treble are jacked up. You know, that's what my ears like that. So this EQ, it looks really janky. It's got like this horrible font. Someone has pooped in between the volume and the bass. But it does say EQ. I didn't buy that switch. Somebody else did. I never would have bought that square switch. Nonetheless, the EQ was a whole thing. The first one that I made had a hum, and I kept playing around with different weird grounding. Went through every power supply in the house, which we've got a lot of them. And we did find one that was a little bit quieter with the humming. So, and you know, you couldn't hear it until the music stopped, and then it was in there. And that's just unacceptable. So I ordered another board and this one's quiet. It doesn't sing. But last night we looked at the op amplifier, which is the integrated circuit chip, the IC chips that drive this unit. Oftentimes people will get devices like this and they will remove the operational amplifier and order what's known as a Burr Brown IC chip, and they're like cork sniffer, like they're expensive and they sound really good. There's a better signal to noise ratio. It consumes more current, and with an amplifier, you know, you never can get more out than you put in, meaning the power supply ultimately regulates the power of the amplifier. And for me, that means anytime I see low current draw, I'm thinking I'm not going to be getting as high performance as I would with high current draw. Let's turn that power up. So these op amps, they fake them. Typically, like, you know, you'll pay between $0.25 and 75 cents for an op amp. The Burr Browns are $4. So China makes these like crappy op amps, and then they paint the part number on it for the Burr Brown. And actually, the way that I noticed it was, and I'm sorry if you're a regular and you've heard this joke 400 times, they stamp Texas Instruments. Their logo for that brand is an outline of the state of Texas, and it has a T and an I inside the state of Texas, and it's really small on these op amp chips. That logo is tiny, but it's there. And if you look at the counterfeit ones, it looks more like Long Island than Texas. It doesn't look right. It's like Puerto Rico or something. So the proof in the pudding, of course, is putting the headphones on and listening. But also a good way to test that is look up the data sheet of the device online. Look up what the manufacturer says, that how much current that is supposed to draw, and then test it. And if it's drawing half as much current, you got burned. So yeah, the chips that came in this $12.95 board were authentic, and they were new. They're a new op amp. The older ones, they work. Some of them even do sound great to my ear, but then there's like the 741, which is kind of nasty. Just doesn't sound good. But if you're building a distortion, it's great, because you get a little additional flavor out of that you wouldn't normally get. And I find typically distortion can sound the best when it's when you're not getting all your distortion in one place. Like if you run your amp a little hot, and then you have a couple of dirt boxes, and you run two that are set a third of the way up, rather than just one cranked, you can get some more interesting tones that way. So the first amp board that hummed, that had phony chips in it, and I replaced those. And the thing is, I was just kind of learning about the NE5532, this op amp chip. It's not the fancy one, but it's also not the old one, and they were cheap, so I bought a bunch of them. I was on eBay, and I'd be drinking, ordering more, and they all came in, and I was like, oh, I'm set for life. I can pull out the old ones and install these new 5532s and get a little goose there. And then I realized they all have the Long Island. So, wrapping this up, what's in this box? Ooh, who's in here? A little guy. Who's in here? No one. So this is an amplifier. It's a Class D amp, and Class D is the bastard redhead stepchild of the amplifier world. People generally love to talk smack on the Class D. Class A is the best sounding amplifiers, but they're the most inefficient. And for me, a guy who trucks everything down to the quarry, efficiency is a premium. So it has a master volume, bass, and treble. It comes with the heat sink, but it's not installed. And there's a little chassis kit. I'm going to show you all that. Here's the chip. And believe it or not, this little thing, it puts out 100 watts. And if you don't really know, I can't perceive how anyone who does not understand the concept of wattage will be watching this still. But a Marshall, you see that in the MTV, that's a 100 watt amp. You know, they're loud. It's really loud. Like your TV is like probably 1 watt, you know. This little tiny chip, and that is 100 watts. It's 50 by 2. It's a stereo amp. So there's a power connector back here. There's 2 speaker connectors, and then there's an input connector. So for me to, like, let's say I Goodwill some speakers, I can throw this down and get my MP3 player and test them. Or let's say I could use it as a guitar amp, because the modern multi-effectors, they have amp simulators in them that sound fantastic. So this is a really neat thing. They're $16 right now. This stuff is only going up in price and with the shipping, so I ordered it now. I have quite a few of these Class D amps that I've built for our music hobby, but this one, it comes with a little orange screwdriver, and there's connectors. There's in this baggie, this is the heat sink, and I will use JB Weld automotive epoxy to glue that onto the chip. And that JB Weld, it transfers heat very efficiently. So you get knobs, you get one of these connectors, like you could just cut your wire in your power supply and screw it in on these screws, and then stick this little guy in there. Nice little thing to have. And you also get this kit with a bunch of little screws and standoff posts, and this will serve as the roof for the thing. And then it has a diagram like auxiliary in, DC 9 to 24 volt, right and left speaker, and illustrates the polarity. So yeah, this is if you want to set, like, instead of a boom box, you could, if you're going to go to a party and you want to bring your music outside or on the patio, something like this, you know, you plop this down, you put your power supply in, get your MP3 player, and then whatever speakers, and you're good to go. Now, I know what you're thinking, that back in the 70s and 80s, more often than not, when there was products from China that boasted specs, impressive specifications, it was all lies. Like, you would go get these flea market EQ, 5-band EQ, Pioneer, or Pioneer was a good brand, Pile of shit. Those things will say 600 watts, and when you look inside of it, there'll be a number on the chip, and you look that up, and it'll say It's an 8 watt 4 per channel. You know, so you do think that the TPA 3116D2, that's a big word, is joshing you. It's fake. You would think that, because they're like, I used to be able to get them for $5 shipped. The mono 100 watt block amp, $5. And we built and used this stuff and like punished it in July, cranking 24 tube seal lead acid batteries all day through it, never ending, all distortion music, and they don't even break a sweat. But there's some other channels here on YouTube where the people have purchased an amplifier dynamometer, and this has a big screen on it, all kinds of knobs and connections. You hook the amp up to it, and this device, actually the speaker outputs connect to the dyno, so you don't hear anything, but you send a sine wave through it, and you test what is this amplifier actually putting out. And it will depend on the load. So your speakers have a rating on the back of them. They'll be typically 4 ohm is like for car audio, but things are changing. So you see 6 ohm, you see 8 ohm was typically, in the old days, it was 8 ohm was home stereo. 4 ohm was for car. And the way it works is that ohms is the load, that's the resistance or impedance. And the amplifier will produce twice as much power rating on a 4 ohm load as it would on an 8. So, and of course, as the old analogy goes, we don't get acid grass or neutrons flowing in a crystal lattice matrix. No one rides for free. We don't get anything out that we don't put in, meaning the amplifier is only as powerful as its power supply. So the equation goes, you have to figure what's your power that you're giving it, let's say 24 volts at 5 amps, and what is your load? You know, is it 8 ohms? Is it 2 ohms? So yeah, the way that I'm running these, they're not 100 watt, because sometimes they're getting 6 ohms. I tend to always run them at 24 volts. So that being said, if the manufacturer sells me this and it's rated as a 100 watt amp, and I have looked it up and researched it, and I know that it actually does put out really close to that number, do I call it a 63 watt amp? No, I'm calling it a 100 watt amp. And the reason I bring that up is because if I don't, somebody who knows about this stuff will come in the comment section and go, I don't know where you're getting 100 watt. You know, sorry. You know, it's on eBay. I'm nobody special for using this stuff, but I kind of am, because I was doing this Class D stuff basically as soon as I became aware of it, which was like 2008 was when I was using it to build guitar amps, and that community nobody was doing it, and I was putting up video after video after video and talking about it in the off-topic section. And in 2012, the owner of the forum, it's a do-it-yourself guitar pedal forum, he was like, hey, I was over on eBay and they sell these amplifier boards, And I was thinking you could put this in a box with a speaker and a battery and make a little guitar amp. And I was like, dude, look in your off-topic section in the videos. There's like 50 videos of a full band, and everybody's running Class D. So the topology goes like this. Inside the chip is a mega oscillator, and it produces this huge sine wave that's really powerful. And your music gets impregnated on that sine wave. So the waves get combined. And on the output stage, there is a filter that mutes the sine wave, and what you're left with is your music amplified. So that's the technology behind this. It's between 85 and 93% efficient, and what that means is like your tube amps, if you know about that you would turn it on and a minute would go by and then the tubes would start glowing, and after 5 minutes of those tubes glowing, if you put your hand back there, it was like roasting hot. Now heat is the enemy. Heat means, it's your, the joke goes, are we cooking? Is that, are we going to get some eggs out of this deal? So like I said, there is a trade-off in that tube amp is going to have sag and feel. It's going to have maybe more harmonic content. It's going to have this tube colorization. The way that tubes sound to our ears is, some people really love that sound. I know what the tube sound is. I've got tube amplifiers here, and I've built stereo tube preamps. I do run my stuff through tubes when I record, but for playing remote, you can't. There's no AC. You need AC power. Batteries are DC, so it's a trade-off. And if you want to come at me and be like, a tube amp is always better, I know all about that, and I'm not going to argue about, is it better? It's different. Yeah, it sounds different. And to be honest with you, I'm not that huge of a fan on tube distortion. The tube breakup, that little bit of edge is very pleasing, but the actual tube distortion on a guitar, I wouldn't use it. I would never use that sound. As a matter of fact, I can't stand it. But that's me, and we're all allowed to have our own little quirks and opinions. The subject of music, subjectivity of music, how we all like different music, we all make different music, is a big part of its appeal. So let's agree that we can each have our own opinion, and what works for one guy might not work for the next guy, and try not to be so judgmental about gear if you're a musician. Because even some kid in the bedroom with his Line 6 deserves to have his moment in the sun, as long as he tunes the thing, right? Okay, you guys, thanks for joining me for Mailbag. I hope this was interesting and maybe you learned a little bit. I know the way that I try to approach this stuff, it might not be so technically accurate and scientific, but I try to understand it in basic terms, because that's as far as my understanding goes. You know what I mean? I'm not a smart guy. This is stuff that I've read about and stuff that I've worked with long enough to understand the concepts. But as far as being a pro tech or expert, that's not me. I'm a hack. I do things the wrong way. I use plumber's flux for soldering. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for joining me for Mailbag. Stay cool, hug your pets, and peace.